Improvisation is bigger than jazz harmony and jazz theory, right? That's one application of it. But improvisation is more about just kind of what we do every moment. You know, I'm improvising right now. We're all improvising right now.
Hello, and welcome to The Other Side of the Bell, a podcast dedicated to the world of trumpet, brought to you by Bob Reeves Brass. We want to inspire you to develop joy and confidence in your trumpet playing. I'm your host, John Snell. Joining me today is trumpeter and educator Kris Tiner. Before we get to Kris's interview, let's look at our latest trumpet news. Well, we are officially in summer. Last episode, I officially started the unofficial summer, however you want to say it, getting through Memorial Day and having schools starting to get out. And now we're after June 21st, marking the official start of summer. And it is hot here in LA, but we're cranking out mouthpieces, cranking out valve alignments, and having a lot of fun at the shop. We are traveling, as I've mentioned several times now. The dates are almost upon us for the William Adam International Trumpet Festival, 2026 edition, hosted by Dr. Ricky Spears at the Southern Illinois University in Carbondale, Illinois. The dates for that, July 9th through 12th. We will be there, myself and Matt Collins, who will be joining us from Austin, Texas. We'll be doing valve alignments. We'll have 300 plus mouthpieces to try. We'll have guard bags, including some of their fiberglass versions. We have a triple and a double fiberglass case that we'll be bringing along with us. I just got a huge selection of Charlie Davis mutes, Harmon and straight mutes of all colors, shapes, and sizes. And Charlie will be there, of course. Charlie Davis will be there with, I think, 12 or 14 of his trumpets, several of his B-flats, the Colicchio style 1S2, 1S7, the CD, the signature bell, Charlie Davis signature bell with, I think, a 25 pipe and a 6 pipe. His C trumpets, which are surprisingly good with 229 and 239 bells. He put together a D trumpet because you can never have too many D trumpets in the world, and it plays its socks off. So if you're in the market for a D trumpet and are going to be in Carbondale, come by and check it out. He really has a knack for putting horns together from either various parts or things that he's had an idea to do, and puts the parts together and magically makes these horns just smoke. It's so fun to play. So anyway, and come by and see Charlie. We'll have his books, the Tribute to William Adam book, there, and get him to sign it, get a picture with Charlie, and get the full experience. We just got a shipment of Ulvain mutes from Sweden. We got a bunch of their Poppy Cup mutes, the Dizzy Cup mutes that have been out of stock for a while, and the Stubby Harmon mute that was designed by Lasse Lindgren. So we'll have those at the booth. And if you don't want to buy anything, just come by and chat. Pull up a chair next to the alignment table, and we can have some trumpet therapy. One of the best parts about going to the William Adam Trumpet Conference. So hope to see you there in the week or two, and we'll have the links to where you can sign up to williamadamtrumpet.com, where you can sign up for the conference, and we'll have the links below where you can pre-schedule your valve alignment. I've confirmed the dates for Japan. It'll be at the tail end of summer, September 17th to the 24th. We'll be at Joy Brass in Tokyo. That's our home base. I don't know if we're doing any excursions. We usually try to get to Iwate Prefecture or to Osaka, Nagoya. I don't know if that's on the calendar yet, but I will be in Japan for that week, September 17th to the 24th. So come by, make an appointment, get your horns valve aligned while I'm there. It's a lot cheaper than shipping it to the U.S. We also have a visit to Virtuosity Music in Boston on the books for sometime in October. I will have that date a little bit later this summer when we confirm which weekend I'll be out there. And I just confirmed our third annual visit to North Carolina, visiting our good friends Greg Black in Mount Holly, and then traveling north to Winston-Salem for the NCMEA conference. So making a lot of friends out that direction. And I know some folks weren't able to do alignments last year, so I will be out there again in November. That's always over that Veterans Day weekend, usually the first weekend there in November. So I don't have the dates in front of me, but we have some time to plan. Other than that, that's all the news I have in terms of traveling. I actually got out of the shop this weekend, and I had the honor of playing at the Walt Disney Concert Hall in downtown LA. For those of you watched my interview a few months ago, I played with the Lawyer Big Band, the Los Angeles Big Band of Barristers, and we did a Happy Birthday America concert featuring the Lawyers Orchestra, which I don't play in anymore. And then the big band was featured on the second half on 5 charts to spanned a few decades of big band history in America, and it was a lot of fun. It's a fun hall to play in, certainly beautiful hall, and it was really cool. We played Corner Pocket, of course, Count Basie's classic tune, and we have proud to own Snooky Young's Getson Severinsen. He didn't record Corner Pocket with that one. He didn't have that horn yet. But we have Snooky's personal horn in our collection, and I pulled it out of the vault and used it on Corner Pocket. And it was I was more emotional than I thought. The touchstone of one of my heroes. Certainly, I tried to model my lead playing after Snooky, as I'm sure most of us have. So to get his instrument out and to make music on that instrument in that gorgeous hall, it really got to me. It was a lot of fun, and hopefully a little humble tribute to Snooky. So I got out of the shop, got to play some few notes, and that's what it's all about. Speaking of that, let's get to my interview with Kris Tiner, a good friend of mine, the longtime customer of the shops, and he's doing amazing things up in Bakersfield and just released a fabulous new album. So let's talk to Kris Tiner. Today's episode is brought to you by Bob Reeves Brass, who share your passion for creating extraordinary music. You know that feeling when your instrument just clicks and the music flows effortlessly? That's what Bob Reeves Brass has been helping customers do since 1968. We've helped brass musicians like you achieve their dreams by ensuring their equipment is always in perfect harmony. We know you want to immerse yourself in the art of music making, and we're here to remove any barriers between you and your creative vision. Bob Reeves Brass is truly your one-stop shop for everything you need to fuel your passion and create music that touches hearts and souls. So go ahead, let us help you elevate your sound to new heights. Don't wait another moment to elevate your musical journey with Bob Reeves Brass. Connect with us at bobreeves.com, shoot us an email at info@bobreeves.com, and keep up with the latest news on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter at Bob Reeves Brass. Embrace your passion for music and let Bob Reeves Brass be your partner in creating the extraordinary. Kris Tiner is a California-based trumpet artist, composer, and educator. His music has been performed on 5 continents. His 100-plus recordings have been enthusiastically reviewed in the international jazz press, and he has performance credits on MTV, NBC, PBS, and Comedy Central. Kris has received awards from ASCAP, the American Composers Forum, Chamber of Music America, and in 2023 was recognized as the CMEA Statewide Jazz Educator of the Year. He is a member of the Empty Cage Quartet with recordings on Portugal's Clean Feed label, and he collaborates with guitarist Mike Baguetta in the duo Tin Bag. Kris also performs with the Kathleen Pineda Quartet, Psychic Temple, the Industrial Jazz Group, and the Bakersfield Symphony Orchestra. He is the Director of Jazz Studies at Bakersfield College and has also taught at CalArts and CSU Bakersfield. Kris is the founder of Epigraph Records, an independent label dedicated to new creative music recorded in Bakersfield. His latest release, Sung, with Kathleen Pineda, was just released on Orenda Records, and we'll talk about that in his interview. And now, here's my interview with Kris Tiner. Well, I'm so honored to have joining me today Kris Tiner. Kris, how's it going?
Great.
We were just talking. I'm doing wonderful. We're just talking end of the semester, so you're on your kind of summer break, but not really a break.
That's where you get the 2 greats. It's great.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah.
Ready to talk about trumpet and jazz improvisation. So let's start right from the beginning before we get into the serious stuff. How did you find the trumpet?
Oh gosh, I was absent on the day in fourth grade when the band director handed out instruments. So my first choice I had written down as saxophone. Of course, that's the coolest instrument, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then number two was going to be drums, second coolest instrument.
Yep.
And then I didn't know what to put for number three. And so my dad had played brass instruments. He played low brass and valve trombone. He was a drum major in high school. But he told me, put the trumpet down. You'll always have the melody. You'll always have like the main part. So I put trumpet as number three. And like I said, I was absent the day they actually distributed the instruments out. And so I came a day or two later and talked to the band director, and everybody had already picked saxophone and drums. There were no more spots left. So I got the trumpet. This was like 10 years old, and I had no desire to do anything with the instrument. It was painful. It sounded painful. I was like a shy, quiet kid,
Uh-huh.
I'm still like total introvert. And, you put the loudest possible instrument in my hands, and, when you start playing the trumpet, it's all mistakes, and the mistakes are loud. They're loud mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't practice. I refused. I begged my mom to let me quit, for a couple of years, and she told me I had to stick with it until junior high. So it was just kind of a side thing. I was doing it to please my parents. And then, it was probably 2 or 3 years later, I happened to come across a recording of Louis Armstrong. And I think it was something in my grandparents' record collection I was digging through. And that just hit me like a electric shock, And suddenly that sort of introvert nature and sort of being a shy kid, I realized like here was a guy who was able to just like transmit all of this beauty and personality and joy through that instrument. And it's the same instrument that I have. Like maybe this could be a path, to like learn how to talk to girls and and all those things that a 13-year-old shy kid was nervous about. So I just started listening to music and went from there.
Interesting. Wow, Louis Armstrong. Well, yeah, I mean you're in a club of how many thousands of trumpet players that heard Louis for the first time and just were struck by it. What did that look like afterwards? Did you start playing along with albums, or did you start just digging into the trumpet itself?
Yeah, anything I could get a hold of. I went to the public library where I grew up in Wasco, California, and checked out. I think they had maybe 2 or 3 Louis Armstrong CDs and some Duke Ellington and Dizzy Gillespie and stuff like that. And I would just check them out over and over and over and over and play along and just listen. I still didn't care for, the band at school. Mm-hmm. Really. It was never my thing. Concert band, marching band. I did it all through high school, but it was never really something I cared about. But, just this side obsession with learning all about jazz. And by the time I got to high school, it was like Miles and Coltrane. Those were my obsession. Thelonious Monk. And I got really into the avant-garde side of things by my senior year in high school. The upside of that is, my parents were really into music. My parents met each other at a Santana concert. My dad was a guitarist. He always jammed on his guitar after work. He was really into Jimi Hendrix. That was his guy. So if I played rock and roll in my room, my dad would want to come in and hang out. My parents would, they enjoyed that. But if I was playing like John Coltrane's Stellar Regions or Love Supreme or something like that, it kept my parents away. So, it gave me some solitude and some alone time and just sort of I just became really curious about how you could develop a voice, and an individual sound and a creativity through music. That's always what fascinated me. Not really the performance side of it, not really the like being in front of people and doing the whole show part of it, but just the exploration.
Fascinating. And this is at a young age. I mean, that's a
high school. Yeah.
Yeah. Pretty deep thought already at as a young player. Did you have any private lessons, or were you self-taught, or was it just through the band, your school band?
Yeah, school band. And I had fortunately the band director, where I went to high school was a trumpet player. He had just come in, a guy named Rob Martins, and he's still a colleague. He still teaches up here in Bakersfield. So I got some private lessons from him, and he took me through like the Clark studies and started working on the Haydn concerto and everything. That was in junior high. And then I saved my money and, paid for some lessons with some of the symphony guys in Bakersfield when I got to high school. But really it was it was college before I really got to focus on it properly.
And in terms of your jazz playing, was that kind of just a organic growth in terms of going from Louis Armstrong up through bebop era into avant-garde?
Yeah, it was sort of like just following that trail of breadcrumbs. This was like all before the internet. So I graduated high school in 1996. And then that summer is when I, logged onto the internet the first time. So it was all like public library and mail order. And
it's like we're dinosaurs.
Yeah. I don't want to sound too old and grumpy, but it was a lot of work to discover things. And so when you did get an album in your hands, or you paid $20 for like a CD, and it was, I remember going to the record store and like flipping through the Miles Davis band, and you just looking at the album covers. All right, so Miles Smiles, and then Bitches Brew, and then like Doo Bop, and like trying to figure out imagine what the music sounds like based on what the cover looks like. Mm-hmm. And then you'd bring it home, and it would be sometimes I would just look at the album cover for a couple of days and just imagine what the music might sound like before I got the guts to put it on. Cause
wow.
There's $20, that was like your income for the week or allowance or whatever, that you've invested. And so it really meant a lot to like get an album and just dive into it. And I guess that was kind of unique in that way, but I eventually found some college students that were part of the jazz program at CSU Bakersfield and started jamming with them a little bit, junior and senior year in high school. And the director out there, Dr. Doug Davis, kind of mentored me and got me into playing with the big band and playing on some of the small combo concerts with the college guys. And that was like, then I had a band and, started hitting up coffee houses around town and just playing wherever I could, writing music, writing some of my own tunes. Yeah.
17, 18 years old. You said this is all high school?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Amazing. So when it came time to, you're graduating high school, was it an easy choice to go on? You decided to go on into music? What did that look like?
It was, there was a scholarship involved if I stayed in town. And Wasco, where I grew up, is about 30 miles north of Bakersfield. So going to CSUB was easy. It was affordable. My parents didn't really have money to send me to college. But music was my ticket to college, and college was my ticket to being able to play more music. And I'd already had kind of a connection there. So, I was playing gigs for money professionally by the time I graduated high school. And, my parents were supportive. Like I remember the first time I came home from a 2-hour gig and, showed my dad I had made like $150. And he looked at that and realized that's probably about as much as he made, working hard labor. He was a mechanic. 8 or 9 hour day. So I remember like there being an understanding established that, this is something you could do. So my parents were always supportive. My mom still comes to every show. She's my number one fan still. Yeah. She lives nearby.
Amazing. And for folks listening, international listeners, so Bakersfield is it's about an hour and a half outside of Los Angeles, right? Mm-hmm. In the San Joaquin Valley. So primarily known for farms, ranches, and oil, I guess, right?
Yeah. And, and Bakersfield historically was a center for country music. Music put this town on the map in the 50s and 60s, and Buck Owens and Merle Haggard, of course, but there were a whole decades of people before that who paved the way for that. And there was always been a healthy jazz scene, a small jazz scene, but a lot of really wonderful, great musicians and players who have come here. Mm-hmm. And the symphony orchestra that's just about to celebrate 90 years as an institution. My private instructor when I got to CSUB was Charles Brady, who had grown up in Delano, which is a little bit further north, but he went to USC and was roommates with Tom Stevens. And then Charles famously recorded this Stravinsky conducting L'Histoire de Soldat. Charles played cornet on that legendary recording, and then went on to principal trumpet in the National Symphony in Washington, D.C. for, I think, most of the 1960s. And then Charles came back to Bakersfield and just taught private lessons and middle school band. So I got to see him every week. And
amazing player.
Slowly, he's
talk incredible. About a hidden gem. Yeah. I know my dad got to play with him once up there. Yeah, he got off as a Bakersfield Symphony, he knew of Charles Brady, didn't know he was for any of that back history. Sitting next to him, I think my dad was straight out of college, and you're Charles Brady?
Gosh. It was incredible. People who knew that he was a special thing, to have in this community. It took me a little while to realize that, of course, when I learned who Stravinsky was and what that all meant. But when I went to CalArts for my master's degree, my first year at CalArts was Ed Carroll's first year. He was just been hired to start the jazz program, or his brass program. I was there to study with Leo Smith in the kind of the jazz and performer composer world. So I was able to hit up Ed Carroll for lessons and got some classical lessons with Ed. And he really didn't have any trumpet students at that time. And he had asked me kind of who I'd study with. And I mentioned Charles Brady, and his mouth dropped. Because, of course, he's a legend. That recording is legendary, but a lot of people just weren't aware of where he ended up or why or anything.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm curious what your lessons were like with him.
He was a very, very religious guy, very deeply Christian man. And it was a lot of sort of connecting together the dots between music, why we play music, the dedication that's involved. And it was a spiritual thing for him, it was a deeply spiritual thing for him. So a lot of times it felt like he was more concerned with how I was doing in my life, than my trumpet playing. But I gradually became to understand, and appreciate that it was all connected for him. And so he would tell stories and give me a lot of really deep lessons. And musically, it was a lot of, interpretation. We studied all the classical solo literature, undergrad level solo stuff. And that was never really my ambition to perform any of that professionally, but just kind of seeing him work through these things and playing along with him. And it was a lot about how do we bring the music off the page, not a whole lot of nuts and bolts. If I asked him about a mouthpiece or a lip thing or a tongue thing, he would never get very specific with that. But it was a lot of just kind of finding the beauty and interpreting and having a voice.
Yeah. Interesting. And so during that time, you were also, were you primarily focused? I know he was teaching you classical or orchestral style playing. Was your primary focus to become a jazz player, composer? What were your aspirations?
My main thing was writing music and having a band and playing and just exploring more, creative music with my friends. I would do pit work and, concert band stuff here and there, but even at that time in undergrad, I wasn't 100% sure I wanted to pursue music as a performing profession or, as a commercial trumpet player, studio trumpet player. That never really appealed to me. I just wanted to learn more about music and explore more and really kind of understand how improvisation and the creative side of things all fit together. And that was still that's what excites me about it, is being able to teach and go and play and create spontaneous music with my friends. That's the fun in it for me.
Yeah. Well, we'll get into that. I want to finish up at least the education part of things. So you'd mentioned you went to CalArts. Was that immediately after Bakersfield? And what was your choice to go there?
Another just kind of crazy coincidence. I finished my bachelor's degree and I was actually teaching visual art at the high school I went to up in Wasco, covering long-term for my former teacher. I had an art minor and a music major in my bachelor's, so I was able to do that. Taught for 6 months, high school art, and that led me to decide that I did not want to be a high school teacher. But I had, a couple years before that, I had encountered Wadada Leo Smith, who was teaching at CalArts at an IAJE conference. I remember hearing his trumpet through the walls. I was in this music industry panel discussion session with Herbie Hancock and a bunch of producers and executives, and the room was packed at this hotel down in Anaheim. And I heard this trumpet blast from next door. And then again, and I thought, what is that? And it went on for a few minutes. And finally I decided I've got to get out of here. I got to go here. I got to know who that is. And I looked at my program and I saw that it was a CalArts faculty concert. And this was Wadada Leo Smith was performing. And I'd heard about him. I kind of knew of the program at CalArts. So I was on the inside row against the wall with just hundreds of people packed into this little conference room. And Herbie Hancock is speaking about something. And I as discreetly as I could, got up, stood up, climbed over these people. I remember looking up at Herbie and making eye contact with him. And he gave me kind of a dirty look. And and I just knew I had to get out of there. So I hightailed it out and went next door. And Wadada was doing a duet, just trumpet with John Bergamo on just a frame drum, just the two of them. And it was like, that was like, this is where I want to be. This is the guy. I've got to meet him. And so I stayed for this concert, and then I went up and approached him afterwards, and he gave me his address. He was so sweet. He said, like, come by the house. I asked him if he taught lessons, and how much it would be. And so I would go to his house after that about once a month on a Sunday afternoon, and I'd give him $40 for an hour, but I'd end up staying 3 or 4 hours, and his wife would make tea and eventually dinner, and we'd watch basketball and just hang out. And
oh, wow.
And that was a monthly thing for me. And that really gave me the drive to finish my degree and have a destination. CalArts became a very clear goal at that point, because I didn't know what I wanted to do really. Maybe teach. I was starting to think about, being a professor and being able to have the freedom to do music the way I wanted to do it was appealing. But then I realized, like, high school was not going to be it. I got to avoid being a band director or whatever at all costs. High school kids just were brutal.
Not for you.
Yeah.
Sometimes life is more about finding what you don't want to do.
Exactly.
Than finding the magic mouthpiece or the magic whatever it is.
Right.
So I want to get into your lessons with Wadada, because we've had Dan Rosenboom on here, and he's talked about some of his teaching. So what was your experience like with Wadada?
At his house, it was a different thing than like at CalArts. Unfortunately, like by the time I got to CalArts in 2001, his career resurgence was beginning, and he would go out for weeks at a time and tour all over Europe at that point. And he actually was on sabbatical my second semester at CalArts, and brought in Leroy Jenkins, who was another colleague of his from the AACM. So I got to study with Leroy, and I was really at CalArts to do a lot of other things. And I still took composition lessons with Wadada in all his classes, but being able to hang with him, just like we got very, very close, just through these monthly sessions at his house. And when we did play together, I have recordings of all this. I'd set a mini disc recording, and we'd play duets and whatever he was working on or whatever he was composing at the time. He was working on the Golden Quartet album, the first Golden Quartet album with Jack DeJohnette and Anthony Davis on piano, and Malachi Magustu from the Art Ensemble Chicago on bass. And he was writing music for that. So he would put the melodies in front of me, and I would play through them so he could hear how they sounded on the trumpet, which was amazing. He would show me kind of what he would do with them, and then he would let me do it. And then he'd say, don't copy me. Don't do what I did. Like, do what you're going to do with it. One day he was talking about being in the Army, and he brought out his little book of Sousa marches, like the little flip book of trumpet parts to the Sousa marches. And we played through some of those little, first and second trumpet parts on the Sousa book together, and then we'd improvise on them. So, let's improvise a march together, right? And then we'll come back to the composition.
Interesting.
One day we talked about intervals. We specifically making melodies out of sixths for like 2 hours. We just played together and tried to create melodies all over the horn, just using a sixth. So really, really, really extremely focused merging of creativity and improvisation and philosophy. And, I ate it all up. That was exactly what I needed and wanted at the time. And fortunately, when I got to CalArts, I had, his classes were still great. I mean, he would do seminars on, like, one of them was Bob Marley and Billie Holiday and Jimi Hendrix. One semester was just comparing the music of those three artists. But I was able to pick up a lot of other stuff at CalArts and, like, study with Ed and do some African music and Indonesian music, because I didn't feel like I had to get everything from Wadada. We'd gone through a lot already.
Yeah. Well, and correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the benefits of CalArts is you can kind of, and not make your own degree, but, you can kind of pave your own path in terms of, you don't have to do certain, like if you go to say like Juilliard or conservatory and you want to be a classical player, you have to do, you have this path, or you have the jazz path, or you have the composer path,
Right.
Whereas CalArts, you're a little more free about what you want to become.
It's true. And it's a lot more integrated than most. And I think, it's about maybe 50 years ahead of where, most institutions are at this point, just like bringing together world music and jazz theory along with, European music theory and looking at all those on the same plane. In Wadada's program, it was like you were required to take his classes, and you're required to take African drumming ensemble every semester. And then there were a couple other like 20th century music classes you had to take. Everything else, like probably 50% of my curriculum was my choice. So, and that's what he wanted, was for the students in this program to be able to fill in their schedules with, based on their instruments and their goals and their own research. Mm-hmm. So I was able to do a lot. I got took all of Charlie Hayden's classes, every semester, and got to work with Mort Subotnick, who was like an electronic music pioneer. He was still teaching there. I knew I was only going to be there for 2 years, so I took 22 units a semester and just absorbed as much as I possibly could.
Cram as much in as you can. Wow.
Yeah. Graduation was a sad day, man. It was hard to say goodbye to that place.
And during this time, you still have you're running your own groups. You're still freelancing, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I started a band with some other students who were there to study with Wadada called the Empty Cage Quartet. And we did our first West Coast tour March of 2003. That was the year I graduated. And so we started writing music for that group maybe 6 months before, and just rehearsed every week before we finally took it out. But I was with that quartet for 15 years, and we made a bunch of records and toured Europe and all across the US multiple times, and started working in another band at that time called the Industrial Jazz Group, which was kind of like all original music. It eventually became a big band. It was 7 musicians when I started playing with them, and Dan Rosenboom eventually joined that group, but we toured all over the place too. So I through that CalArts experience, I was able to meet a lot of musicians that I still play with still today.
Mm-hmm. And you ended up teaching there for a while, right?
Yeah. I covered for John Fumo teaching jazz trumpet when he was out with Neil Diamond for a couple of years.
Was it
some of those final tours? Yeah.
It must have been a cool experience to go back and be a professor at a place that you love so much as a student.
Yeah. It's definitely different to see it from the other side. The more dramatic experience was going back maybe a couple of years after I graduated to do like a workshop or to speak to a class or something. Ed would bring me in to talk to his trumpet majors about, how to book gigs and start a record label and things like that. And it was like 2 years out from when I was there, I didn't recognize anybody but the faculty. And so you're walking through the halls, and I've talked to, friends of mine who had this experience. You're walking through the halls and everything seems familiar like home, but all the people are strangers.
Yeah.
That was hard. Once I was over that, teaching there was a lot of fun for sure.
Yeah. So talk about some of your projects. So after, I'm going to say you're getting into the real world because you've been in school, but you were already in the real world performing and recording and putting your own groups together, et cetera. How does putting together a career look like now through touring and through recording? And, what were you doing?
Gosh, it looked a lot different 20 years ago. Or 23 years ago now than it does today even. There was no social media. We were still like, when we started touring and making records, it was CDs and mailings. Like I was at the post office every other day sending CDs out and making posters, sending those out when we did a tour. Lots of email. But yeah, we were just figuring it out as we went, And one of the keys for me was to try to collaborate with people from other parts of the country. And one of the great things about CalArts is like people were coming in from all over the world. So when we all graduated, everybody kind of went back to where they were from. A lot of people went to New York. I stayed here actually because I got married to my wife, Kim, and we moved in together in Bakersfield. And I started teaching part-time at Bakersfield College, where I still work, but as an adjunct. So that was a day gig that kept me busy maybe 2 or 3 days a week, but allowed me to be able to perform at night and drive to LA almost every other day and play or, record, whatever. And just really trying to network into a community of like-minded musicians who were making original music and trying to figure out how to get it out. The other side of that is like being in a small community like this. I have been able to, coordinate a lot of events and bring people through. So, I try to establish this model where we would book performances that would feature local bands alongside of touring artists that would come through. So it's a lot of bartering, give and take in the industry. And what we were doing is like, creative jazz, original music. And so a lot of it has felt like very much outside of, what the conventional wisdom of like how to succeed in the music industry. This is all about like who you know and who you can support and who can support you. So if I book a show, for somebody coming down the West Coast and they're from, some other town, New York or Chicago or whatever, then I go out to those places and I have a contact and I can, I can hit them up. You have to be careful not to overdo it, and not to exploit those things, but to really keep it a supportive network of like-minded creative people. I feel like it's a healthy scene. There's a lot of really beautiful improvising creative musicians out there that are willing to work for each other to make sure that we can all get our music heard.
Yeah.
So that's the work I've been doing for 25 years now. And a lot of the projects that I put my name on are really collaborative projects. So there's always someone else that has as much of a creative stake in it as I do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's some wonderful insight into, jazz is not necessarily mainstream. And then, as you said, the kind of creative, original improvisation is kind of its own little niche, somewhat associated to jazz, but it's still a vibrant scene, as you were saying. So I want to spend some time talking about your latest album that actually just came out as of when this podcast will post, right? Sung, right, is the name of the album?
Sung.
Yeah. Tell us about that.
There's no singing on it. It's trumpet and piano. I've been performing with Kathleen Pineda, who's a wonderful pianist and composer from LA, for over 15 years. Initially with her quartet, which has released some albums on Arenda Records, which is Dan Rosenblum's label. Kathleen was at CalArts as an undergraduate classical piano major when I was there. So we never really met each other. But then she went away, moved to New York, and decided she wanted to be a jazz musician instead. And so then she came back to CalArts for a master's degree, and that's when we started playing with each other a bunch of years back. And we kind of started once in a while playing a duo gig here and there, maybe like a background jazz standards type situation. And then we started writing some music, interpreting our own music as a duo in the context of her quartet concerts. We would do a little duo moment. And we just loved it so much playing with each other. I mean, she's one of the most listening and supportive musicians I've ever played with. We just have a telepathy that's pretty magical. So we finally put a recording session together last summer. We've been talking about it for 3 years. I was able to get a grant to pay for a lot of it, but we recorded down at Tritone Studios in Glendale with a master engineer named Tally Sherwood and one of the best grand pianos in LA. I mean, the instrument is just immaculate, and the sound on the record, we're just both so proud of it. So it is 7 original compositions and then one piece that was written by Charlie Hayden, who we both studied with at CalArts.
What fun.
Yeah.
What fun. I heard some snippets of it. Where can folks find it? You have it streaming, or is it through Arenda Records? Or
yeah, it'll be on all the streaming services, and we did a limited run of the vinyl, so you can order that from just about anywhere. The Bandcamp page for Arenda Records would probably be the best way to do it.
Okay. So directly supports the artist.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Unlike some of those other streaming platforms that shall not be named. Yeah. And would you mind talking a little bit about, because I know I read some of the liner notes that you have a piece on there kind of as a tribute to Kenny Wheeler or inspired by Kenny Wheeler. Is that correct?
Yeah. It was actually written for another band I've got called Present Past with some musicians from San Francisco. And our idea with that band was to use the instrumentation of the Angel Song record, which is Kenny Wheeler and Lee Konitz and Bill Frisell and Dave Holland. Really beautiful Kenny Wheeler record on ECM, but to write our own music for that instrumentation. So I wrote that piece for them, but then Kathleen and I recorded it, and it came out so nice with Kathleen. But it was a thing that I just kind of was practicing, and I sat down and started improvising this line a little bit, and then kind of liked it. So I hit the recorded a voice memo and just played it from start to finish and then transcribed it later. And then that became the composition. That's happened maybe 2 or 3 times in my life where, a piece gets written just, and it's like comes from somewhere else entirely. So, that's the opening piece on the record. There's a piece on there that I wrote 25 years ago for my mentor, Doug Davis, who was my composition and jazz professor at CSUB. He was the first person to really encourage me to write music. That's the piece called Sung, which the album gets its title from. And then I've got a piece that I wrote the day before the recording session, just a short thing that Kathleen and I improvise on. Kathleen's music on the record was written more recently. Most of her tunes were written during that period. She lives in Altadena and was forced out of her home during the fires last year. And her home didn't burn down, but the process of, working with the insurance company and eventually a lawsuit, with the insurance company over just the process of them getting back into their home before it was really safe. She wrote several pieces of music during that time when she was living with her family in a hotel room. I think something like 13 different hotels they had to move between over this like months and months and months. So New Build is a piece that was kind of about the Altadena community rebuilding after those fires. There's a couple other pieces on that album from that time. So the whole side 2 of the record is really kind of a suite of compositions that are about those experiences, newer pieces.
Wow. And I want to talk about the recording process, and it doesn't necessarily have to be this specific album, but just in general, especially when so much of it is improvised. You go in with, sometimes you have sheet music or some kind of form, but then how do you know when you're done? Because you can always, it sounds like a dumb question, but like everything's improvised. How do you judge that this is good enough for the album or that you're happy with the result? Does that make sense?
Yeah. We play and then we listen, and then we play and then we listen some more. So it's you can't just go in and try to like knock it all out because you don't really have a sense of the flow of the music. So it's kind of like creating one piece of the puzzle at a time. We had 8 pieces that we wanted to record, and we knew that was going to be about 40 minutes. So we were thinking vinyl record, it's actually ended up being about 35. Couple of second takes in there, but there was a lot of kind of sitting and listening to what we had done in between the tracking, and then deciding how we wanted to do the next piece, and which piece do we play next, and how do we want this to all fit together. So there's pre-planning. I mean, we'd rehearsed a couple times, and some of the music we've been playing together for years, and then some of it was really recent that we just learned that week. And so it's a lot of trust involved, trusting each other and knowing that we're not going to have differences in the session, but if differences come up, differences of opinion or thought about what to do next, that we can work through that and talk through it and decide where we want the album to go. And that's a lot easier when there are only 2 people in the band than if you're dealing with 4 or 5.
Yeah, it gets exponentially harder.
Yeah.
Because I just think like you're listening back and you're like, okay, well, that's good. But then that may bring up another idea that you'd want to put down. And it's just like, I feel like that creative process can never end. And it's like, okay, where do you draw the line? And like, yep, this is the piece. Yeah. You just have to say, well, we got to get 8 of these done. We're happy with this.
Fortunately, like studio time is expensive. So we knew we actually ended about a half an hour early. I mean, part of that was like Tally was so great. He was just on it from the beginning. I mean, it took him about 2 minutes to get the perfect sounds dialed in, and he mixed the record as well, and hardly had to do anything at all in the mixing.
So I was listening. The one you have online right now, is that flugelhorn? I mean, you sound gorgeous on that. What were you using? Yeah, New Build.
New Build is flugelhorn, right?
That's gorgeous. I could listen to that all day.
Kathleen wrote that, like I said, as sort of a tribute to the Altadena community, and her inspiration there was like the Stravinsky sort of jazz marches, that Stravinsky would write. Mm-hmm. And she didn't know anything about my studying with Charles Brady and that. I mean, I love that, that Stravinsky sort of fake jazz music, that you get a little bit of that in L'Histoire, but the Ebony Concerto and things like that. I love that music so much because Stravinsky loved jazz, but he had this very narrow picture of what it was, at least in the beginning before he moved to the U.S. And so, she wrote this and said, I got the Stravinsky type thing. And of course, like I immediately knew what I wanted to do with it.
Yeah.
It's a good piece.
Gorgeous. So, I mean, on the rest of the album, is it a mix of flugel and trumpet, or was it just that one you used flugel for, if you remember?
Yeah, I used flugel on the Charlie Hayden piece, Silence, which is probably my favorite piece of music ever written. I mean, it's just a few bars, that Charlie wrote, but it's this sort of like Bach chorale type thing, but with these Charlie Hayden harmonies. And I really love what we did with that. And that's a piece that we play a lot at our concerts. There's a chorale that Kathleen wrote that ends the album that I play flugelhorn. The rest of it is trumpet, and there's a couple of muted things. I use one of Tom Clary's cut mutes on a piece that Kathleen wrote for an old friend. It's kind of like a Chopin type, real sad ballad type thing. And so the cut mute gives it kind of this sad clown, kind of smiling, sad clown quality, where there's this smile on the outside, but this sort of nostalgia and sentimentality on the inside. I can't wait to play that for Tom because it came out so nice with that.
Oh yeah, so you got to send it to him. Oh, he'll love it. What a dear friend. So the album is already out. We'll have the links to where folks can get it. I want to spend some time talking about your education career in education up in Bakersfield, and some get into some improvisation topics because I know you're deep into those. So I kind of picking up your education career, you were part-time faculty for a while, and eventually, a full-time position opened up, or you decided to go all in? How did that turn out?
That's all accurate. And you're describing about a 15-year period in my life that, when I started, it was great teaching a couple of classes, but, enough to bring in enough money to cover my side of things, at home. And I started at Bakersfield College running the jazz ensemble and teaching a couple of music appreciation classes in 2004. And then I picked up a couple classes at CSU Bakersfield and eventually started running the trumpet studio there. A few years after that, I got called to sub for John Fumo at CalArts. I was picking up classes along the way, like Taft College and College of the Canyons in Valencia. And all of it, made it to where I could still play gigs, as I said, and like travel a lot and go out for a week if I needed to on tour. But man, by the time the full-time position came up at BC, I was teaching at 4 different colleges. I think I had 5 ensembles, about 12 private students, maybe 4 or 5 music appreciation classes, jazz appreciation, an online class. And I was just burning myself out completely. So fortunately, the administration at Bakersfield College, we had a college president who's now chancellor of the entire community college system, Sonia Christian, and she came in and we had just gotten our Performing Arts Center refurbished. It was back in like 2014, and opened up this beautiful Performing Arts Center with the outdoor theater, indoor theater, recording studio, all the facilities. And she said, I want to put, world-class programs in this world-class facility. And we had just never had that kind of support. It was just a shoestring budget and mostly adjunct faculty running everything for a long time. And so, 2016, the announcement went out that they were going to create a full-time jazz studies position. And I'd been there 13 years running that program as an adjunct by that point. So I had to go through all the hoops. It was like a 6-month process, interview after interview and teaching demonstrations, and finally a meeting with the president. And that final interview, she just kind of thanked me for all the work I had done. But I was so sick by that point, But yeah, that job started in 2017. So this is now my 9th year. I just finished teaching full time, and I was able to drop a lot of the other stuff and really focus on building something here. So we already had the jazz ensemble. That's a big band. And that class started in 1962. So way back, a guy named Ken Fosbender started the Bakersfield College Jazz Ensemble. And we've actually, our archives have dug up history going back to the 1930s of swing bands on campus.
Jeez.
So we're, some of the earliest jazz education in the country was happening at Bakersfield College, even before the campus was built in the 50s.
Amazing.
And so, it was 2017 when we finally made that a full-time position, and I created a jazz combos class and a jazz improvisation class. And so now we're up to 4 faculty-led combos, so a different faculty member with each combo. And I still run the big band, teach jazz improvisation, jazz appreciation, which is a gen ed class, and I teach trumpet. I split the trumpet students with another faculty member, so she takes most of the classical students, and I take most of the jazz students now.
Jeez, what a program. And a program won a Downbeat Award, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you were recognized as a teacher of the year with California State. Was it CASMEC or what's they have so many abbreviations.
Yeah. That was at CASMEC 2023. They gave me the Jazz Educator.
I got it right. CASMEC. Yeah. I know my education association.
You've done your research, man. I'm flattered.
I was going to say SCUSBOA, the literally the worst abbreviation.
Yeah.
It was a Southern California strings and band, whatever. SCUSBOA. It's like you couldn't come up with anything better. But so you've been recognized for that, which is amazing after all the hard work you've put in. So then, I'm curious, we talked about this earlier about, kind of combining your creativity out in the performance world and bringing that into the classroom and then teaching your students about improv. Like, how does that connected?
It's really a gift to be able to, walk into the classroom and just talk about the things that are important to me, the music that's important to me, and try to find a way to make it all relevant to these students. And I came from these outlying areas. A lot of my students come from, Shafter, Wasco, Taft, Tehachapi, and Arvin, and they can't always afford to go away for school, so they come to BC. And we've had quite a few that are really stellar musicians who have gone on and transferred. I've got 6 or 7 students at CSUN right now, a lot of them doing jazz studies. But the majority of the students are really like, they played music in high school and it's really the only thing they care about or are good at. And it's their point of connection with school and with their community of friends. And I was exactly in that place. I loved music and I was really interested in music, but I didn't really have the money to go away for college. And so to be able to, find a way to get these students to experience having their own voice, we really emphasize original music in the program. So, students who come into the jazz combos, they're right away playing each other's music. They're helping each other create arrangements. Our final exam is always a recording session. So we with the 4 combos, we typically record anywhere from 20 to 30 original student compositions every semester. And I've gotten on a cycle where we're releasing an album, a CD and a Bandcamp album just about every year, a year and a half of those recordings. So, taking the students through that whole process of like writing something out in the practice room, bringing it into rehearsal, playing it with your friends, working it out, making some decisions, performing it maybe in a concert or two, and then recording it and then seeing it come back, professionally mixed and mastered and on a CD. That never gets old, man. That still is exciting for me to get the album in the mail and just to know in your heart how much work went into that. So
amazing. Yeah, that sense of creation, and there's something now that exists that wasn't there, a day or a semester ago, kind of thing. So, just like kind of as a general improvisation, I don't know, pedagogy, like, do you have like one foot in kind of that? Okay, you got to learn the kind of the bebop swing style of, who came before us versus original, I would say more creative, but, creative music, original music. How do you kind of toe that line?
It's important to know the tradition, and the way we organize it in our program is the students who are jazz majors, they take private lessons, and then their lessons, they work on standards and, jazz harmony, and they'll start with a blues and a rhythm changes and a, Stella by Starlight or something like that. And they put together combos and they perform for the class, for a recital class. And that happens parallel with what's going on in the actual combos program, which is more focused on original music. So they're getting both sides. And it's been pretty effective to do it that way because I don't want to minimize either one of those things. You can learn how to be more creative and to tap into your own voice. I mean, you're also studying these transcriptions and learning the tunes and learning the history. It'll give you sort of a catapult to finding your own sound when you hear like what Miles did and what, Coltrane did and what Ornette Coleman did. We've got both of those sides going on. And then I have a jazz improvisation class where I try to pull it all together. So we start in that class with a lot of open improvisation, a lot of just kind of tapping into what improvisation actually is, and gradually start to drop in the theory and the 2-5-1s and the major and minor and whole tone and augmented and all that kind of stuff. So, the important thing for me is like, improvisation is bigger than jazz harmony and jazz theory, right? That's one application of it. But improvisation is more about just kind of what we do every moment. I'm improvising right now. We're all improvising right now. You get up and walk to the door, and which room you go into next, that's an improvisation. What you're going to have for dinner. You get in the car and you drive down the highway, that's an improvisation. Everybody's improvising together, and there's trust involved and there's creativity that's involved. If somebody cuts you off, what do you do? And your experience as a human being and whether you're driving or, making lunch or whatever is going to lead you up to that point where you make a wise decision or a functional decision. or whether it becomes a life or death situation, right? And when we're being creative, we tap into all of that, and we think we're learning to play music together, but we're really learning about these bigger things, and kind of understanding the processes that are more natural, more innate than we would maybe give them credit for.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Wow, fascinating. You've mentioned a few times about helping students find their own voice. I mean, what are some things as a teacher you can do to help that? I mean, it can't be systematic, right? Because everyone's different.
Yeah, I mean, just one thing is like opening them up, and just kind of taking the music theory out of it for a minute. Of course, they're all studying music theory, but the students in my class, some of them are classical musicians who have never improvised. Some of them are jazz musicians who really want to learn more about it. Some of them are just scared to death, at just the word. There's like, when you start playing music, you might learn like hot cross buns or something right off the page. And your first music lesson is like, here are the notes on the page. Now play these notes. No, that note was wrong. Go back and play that note again and get them all right, And so there's this respect that is established for the composition, for the music on the page. And one thing that I've observed, being around people who have only played classical music for their whole lives, is that there's a gulf that just gets wider and wider between the person who plays music and the person who composed that music and wrote that music. And it starts with like hot cross buns, and it ends up with like somebody playing Stravinsky in a symphony orchestra. The composer is like this godlike figure that gets further and further away from us. Mm-hmm. And if we identify that act of composition with creativity, then that possibility gets further and further away from us, as creative musicians. And so in order to bring that back, and I'm working with 18 and 19-year-olds, so it doesn't take long to like bring them back to that. And just to say like, how many notes can you play? All right, let's just use 2 or 3 of them right now and create something with these 2 or 3 notes. Or I have little things that I'll do where like, they'll take their phone number and use the digits of their phone number as like, okay, so let's say your first number in your phone number is 6. You're going to play a note for 6 beats. And then your next number is 6. You're going to rest for 6 beats. And then your next number is maybe 1. You'll play a note for 1 beat. And then they'll go along with their phone number like that, or we can assign intervals to those numbers or use the letters in their name to, do different things. And just if they can see that music can be designed from such a familiar place or a familiar little piece of information, then you almost kind of like trick them into being creative. And realizing that, improvisation and composition are similar, but it's not the same. I mean, they're overlapping. Improvisation is really like a study of the present and what you have to work with in that present moment. One of the first things I'll do is have the musicians play their favorite note. Like, what's your favorite note on your instrument? What's your favorite? And most of them have never thought about this before. And I'll show them, like, for me, my favorite note is E, top space E on the trumpet, because you can play that 4 different ways. And you can get all these different half valve sounds with just that, because of all the different overlapping fingerings for that. And so I'll give them an example. That's my favorite sound on the trumpet. So they'll figure out their favorite sound and then pick a sound that's like, doesn't sound like your instrument at all. Could you make a sound on your instrument that is completely non-idiomatic? So playing a trumpet in a way where it doesn't sound like a trumpet, or playing a violin in a way where it doesn't sound like a violin. Okay, now you've got these 2 sounds. Let's create with those. And when I point at you, you decide which one of those sounds to play and how long and how loud or soft. So you understand that, we begin to understand that improvising is making choices, and it's as simple as that. But the tricky part is knowing what you have to choose from.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. That makes it fun. Oh my gosh. It's
a lot of fun. Yeah.
I love it.
A lot of fun.
I have to drive over the Grapevine and start taking classes.
Come on up.
My 7th career. I want to.
I'll give you a scholarship.
All right. Now we're talking. And you said Bakersfield College. It's a 2-year program, right? It's a community college, or is it a 4-year?
It's a community college, yeah.
So you get your students for 2 years and then they transfer on. It's amazing what you can get done in that amount of time.
We recommend they stay for 3 years because there's so much to do. We have a commercial music certificate program, so they can take music technology. They can take this improvisation class. Isn't part of the degree yet. It will be eventually, but there's so many things. I mean, community college is cheap. it's a great place to just kind of explore your interests and, and write out those interests you already have. The students who are coming, like I said before, they played music in high school and that's what they enjoy. And that's the thing that gets them on campus in the first place. Yeah, it's a really beautiful place to be. I love teaching at CalArts and in the 4-year system as well, but I would much rather be here.
Amazing. And we had one of your students work here for a while. Andrew Morgan was the drummer in a trumpet shop. He was a fabulous employee, and he's actually back up there now.
We've been hanging out a little bit. He's a good guy.
Yeah, wonderful employee, wonderful jazz drummer and death metal drummer as well. We really enjoyed him having him here for a few years. Before I let you go, Kris, a couple things I want to talk about, and I hate always asking this because you have an album release and that's one of your babies out there, and you just got through that. Any other projects in the pipeline? Any other recordings or performing? What do you have coming up?
Yeah, Kathleen and we will be playing in June at Healing Force of the Universe, which is a record store in Pasadena that also has a really great concert programming going on. I have some collaborations with some musicians in San Francisco coming up in June. Thing with Vinny Golia, a large ensemble thing in July. Vinny's a great, legendary band leader and creative musician in LA. Mm-hmm. Yeah, little things here and there. I have a trio with a bassist from LA named Miller Wren and Elif Dinser, who's a harpist from Turkey, but she lives in LA. And we've got a couple of things going on, maybe recording soon. And that's all improvised music.
Busy summer. No summers off, right?
No, well, I got to do it in the summer because I get so busy during the school year. Yeah.
I love it. And so website, social media, kristiner.com is the website. What's the best place for folks to find out when you're playing or how to get your albums? Website, social media? Yeah,
website. I try to do the Instagram and Facebook thing. Yeah, it drives me crazy, but I'm on there.
You, me, and everybody. So again, we'll have the links to those down in the show notes and the description so folks can just click over and see where you're playing. Before I get to the last question, we didn't talk about equipment, and I always get angry emails when I don't ask about equipment. You'd mentioned flugelhorn, but which flugelhorn and which trumpet you're using and mouthpieces and that kind of fun stuff?
I'm into Schilke instruments, so I've been playing Schilke trumpet and flugelhorn for about the last 10 plus years. So my flugel is the Schilke, the first model that they made of flugelhorn of the 1040 flugel. And then my B-flat trumpet is a Schilke, the copper handcraft, the HC2, which is an incredible instrument for improvised music. That copper bell responds so quickly. It's like I can think a sound, and it's immediately on the other side of the room. But it's difficult. It doesn't work for everything. But I try to make it work for everything. And it's really it's allowed me to find, new colors and dimensions to my voice that like nothing else has ever done. And I'm kind of a minimalist, man. I don't really collect a lot of horns or anything. I've got a C trumpet that's also a Schilke that I'll use if I play in the orchestra or something like that. But yeah. And as far as mouthpieces, I've been using Mark Curry's stuff for a long time. I'm on his artist page, and then Monette mouthpieces here and there, but just whatever works. I try not to lose too much time thinking about gear. And I'm like, if I'm not using it, it has to be out of the house. I give it away or I sell it. Because I don't want to be like the gearhead. I feel like every time you change something, it sets you back. And then you have to kind of catch back up to where you were or would have been if you hadn't changed anything. So I have a very difficult relationship with that kind of stuff,
Well, but you
try to make it work. Yeah.
You found out what works for you, and don't put it in the house either.
Yeah.
Set it and forget it, right? Isn't that the old QVC line or Ron Popeil, something like that?
Charles Brady gave me the best mouthpiece advice ever. I was asking him about something about mouthpieces. I was always, I was in college, I was experimenting with stuff, always trying to figure something out. And he would never like give me anything. But one day he said, Kris, it's better to have one bad mouthpiece than two good ones. And you know why? And I said, no. And he said, because if you're up on stage playing and you've only got one bad mouthpiece, you've got to make it work. And so you'll figure out what you have to do to make that work. If you've got two good mouthpieces and you're on stage and you're playing one of them and something goes wrong, then all you're thinking about is, if I could only get back to my case and grab that other mouthpiece, everything's going to be all right. So you're always swapping it out. And that, I've tried to live by that philosophy, but I know who I'm talking to here. You guys all make your living off of the 100 mouthpiece guys, much less the 2 mouthpieces.
Yeah, for every Kris Tiner, there's a Doc Severinsen.
Of course.
It's like it's a spectrum, and you find what works for you, and that's all that matters. And that's wonderful advice too. Like that's having confidence in your equipment is.
Yeah, you want a story about that legendary Charles recording of L'Histoire with Stravinsky. Tom Stevens told this to one of my students who was working with him at Chosen Bell. And Tom and Charles are really tight, So Charles left the house that morning for the recording session, and he left his cornet mouthpiece at home, a 2C or whatever that he was familiar with. And he didn't have time to go back and get it. So Tom Stevens was with him and loaned him an old 7C, which Tom said was just a complete piece of shit. And Charles played that entire recording session, legendary recording, on a 7C piece of crap mouthpiece that he was completely unfamiliar with and had never touched before that day. And he played beautifully.
Yep.
Amazing.
He
didn't mention that when he was telling me the 2 mouthpiece thing, but it's like, that's what he did.
Let's get the job done. Bottom line. Amazing. Well, yeah, the great story. I'm glad we got that in there. Kris, man, this has been awesome. I can't wait to hear the whole album here in a few days. And if you're listening to this podcast, you can go and listen to the whole album, or even better yet, buy it on vinyl and listen to it on your turntable. So Kris, with that, before I let you go, if I can ask you one last question, and that would be, if you could leave our listeners with your best piece of advice, and it could be about anything, what would that be?
Improvise something every day, as part of your practice. Make sure there's a spot in there where you just go for it, and stay in contact with that creativity. Like I was saying, we get further and further away from it when we separate ourselves from the point of creating music, but that's what we are as musicians. We improvise all day long. And this became really real for me when I had kids. And you can see, like, hand a musical instrument to a child. What do? They immediately start improvising with it. It's our natural state of being. They don't need a score. They don't need to learn how to read music before they do anything. Hand a drum or a trumpet or something to a kid, and they'll immediately start playing. So that's what brings me back to kind of who I am and what I want to do every day, is just sitting down and getting past the sound and the technique and the scales and the exercises, but just like, now play.
Wonderful advice. Wonderful to have you on today, Kris. You got to next time you're coming down through LA, you got to stop by the shop on your way down. We'll have lunch or something.
Last few times I've been there, you've been out of town or in Japan or something. So it's nice to talk to you, because I always seem to miss you.
Yeah. So we'll have to make a point of getting together, and can't wait to listen to the full album sung. We'll have the links down below, and thank you for being on the other side of the bell.
Thanks, John.
Well, as I opened the interview with, this was an interview long time in the making. I had actually scheduled Kris to do an interview at ITG a couple years ago, and he was the last interview of the day, and the day went long, and then there was some chaos that broke out at the Bob Reeves Brass booth that prevented me from doing what I really enjoy doing, and is talking to people. And so, unfortunately, I had to cancel Kris's interview back then. And I'm so glad I did, because now I got to talk to him about his latest album, Sung, and what a fabulous, I've listened to a couple tracks before the interview, and now that the album's out, got to listen to the full album, and I just love Kris's playing and Kathleen's piano on that. What an amazing duo, so filled with communication and colors and the sound trading back and forth. They just recently did their CD release party here locally, and can't wait to hear what they are doing next. Also, fascinating conversation about education and creating a program in Bakersfield that, I naively thought, because I think of Bakersfield as an old ranch and oil town, and it's really the hotbed of jazz in Southern California. It sounds like there's a lot more going on up there than in the much bigger local LA proper area. So a huge testament to Kris and his dedication to his students and to creating a flourishing jazz and creative music scene up in Bakersfield. So I'll be heading up the Grapevine more often and checking out the players up there for sure. KrisTiner.com is his website. And then from there, you'll have links to his social media, YouTube, Bandcamp, and all that stuff. And we'll make sure we have all of those links, especially to where you can get Kris's new album song down in the description, either of this video if you're watching on YouTube, or in the description on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or whatever podcast platform you are using. Thank you for listening. We have some wonderful guests coming up this summer. The next episode will be Nick Smart, who you heard on the Kenny Wheeler special a few episodes back. We will be dedicating an episode to Nick and his career. So it'll be great to talk about him. And there's some Kenny Wheeler mixed in with that, of course. So stay tuned for that in a few weeks, and a couple guests that I can't quite spill the beans on yet. So hit that subscribe button, hit that 5-star review button. If you're on YouTube, hit that thumbs up. Leave us a comment. What did you like about what our guests said today? What resonated with you? No pun intended. And that always helps feed the algorithm monster. Thank you for listening and watching. Until next time, let's go out and make some music.